In a world obsessed with flashy heroes and decorated warriors, sometimes the most extraordinary stories belong to the quiet ones who never sought recognition. This is the story of how one grease-stained mechanic proved that true heroism doesn't always wear rank. Sometimes it just carries the right wrench. Every military base has its legends. The drill sergeant who could break you with a stare, the pilot who could land on a dime in a hurricane, the sniper who never missed. But at Naval Base Coronado, their legend wasn't someone you'd expect to see on a recruitment poster. He was a quiet mechanic in Bay 3 who went by just one name, Ernie. Behind the double security gates and chipped paint of the motor pool, where busted Humvees came to die and resurrection happened daily, Ernie had become something of a ghost story. He'd been there longer than anyone could remember. Some said since before the internet existed. Nobody knew his full name. Nobody knew his rank, if he'd ever had one. Nobody even knew if he was active duty or a civilian contractor who'd simply forgotten to leave. What everyone did know was this: if your vehicle was broken beyond hope, you prayed it ended up in Bay 3. Because Ernie didn't just fix machines, he performed miracles on them. He wore the same grease-stained coveralls every single day, showed up before dawn, and left after sunset. He didn't make small talk. He didn't join the younger mechanics for lunch or drinks after shift. When he spoke, which was rare, it was usually a grunt, a nod, or a single word that somehow conveyed everything you needed to know. The rookies were intimidated by him. The veterans respected him. And everyone, from seaman recruits to commanding officers, knew one unspoken rule. When Ernie was working, you stayed out of his way. Chief Petty Officer Durant, who'd been running the motor pool for 8 years, once told his crew, "If Ernie's talking to your truck, step back and let the spirits work." It started as a joke, but over time it became something closer to doctrine. What set Ernie apart wasn't just his experience, though at 62, with sun-darkened skin and hands that looked carved from old leather, he'd clearly seen more than his share of broken machinery. It was the way he approached every job like he was solving a puzzle that only he could see. While other mechanics relied on diagnostic computers and technical manuals, Ernie worked by feel. He'd place his hand on an engine block and somehow know exactly what was wrong. A sputtering generator would fall silent when he touched it. Misaligned axles seemed to adjust themselves under his guidance. He once rebuilt a transmission from salvaged parts in under 4 hours, a job that should have taken days. The younger sailors didn't know what to make of him. Petty Officer Jackson, fresh out of tech school, once watched Ernie fix a hydraulic system that had stumped 3 certified mechanics. "He didn't even look at the manual," Jackson told his buddies later. "Just started pulling parts like he'd built the damn thing himself." But the most famous story, the one that turned Ernie from respected mechanic to base legend, happened on a quiet Tuesday that nobody saw coming. The black SUV arrived without fanfare, transported on a flatbed under military escort. This wasn't your standard issue Humvee or even a high-end command vehicle. This was something else entirely. A modified SEAL transport with bulletproof plating, encrypted communications, and an engine that sounded like barely contained violence. It had been flown in from an overseas base under classified conditions. The only documentation was a terse note: operationally vital. Fix immediately. Discretion required. The motor pool crew gathered around it like surgeons examining a patient. Chief Durant popped the hood and whistled low. Jesus Christ, who the hell wired this thing? The engine bay looked like someone had stuffed the guts of 3 different vehicles into one frame. The electronics didn't match any known schematics. The diagnostic ports threw error codes that weren't in any manual. Even the basic systems, fuel injection, ignition timing, electrical routing, had been so heavily modified that standard troubleshooting procedures were useless. For 3 days, the best mechanics on the base worked in rotating shifts. They pored over encrypted technical documents. They contacted SEAL Command for guidance. They called in specialists from other bases. Nothing worked. The SUV sat in the bay like a 2-ton paperweight, mocking their efforts. By Thursday afternoon, desperation was setting in. The vehicle was supposed to be operational within 72 hours, and they were already past deadline. That's when Chief Durant made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "Get Ernie," he said. Ernie arrived at 0600 Friday morning, 2 hours before his normal shift. He didn't ask questions about the urgency or the classification level. He just stood at the entrance to the bay and stared at the SUV for a long time. 5 minutes, maybe 10. The other mechanics watched nervously, wondering if even their miracle worker had finally met his match. Then he walked a slow circle around the vehicle, running his fingers along the bodywork, listening to sounds no one else could hear. When he finally spoke, it was just one word: clear. Everyone cleared the bay. What followed was 8 hours of absolute silence. No shouting for assistance. No request for manuals or diagnostic equipment. Just Ernie and the ghost machine, locked in a mechanical conversation that no one else was invited to join. The crew took turns peeking through the bay door. They saw him with his hands deep in the engine compartment, his head tilted like he was listening to something. They saw him strip down the entire electrical system and rebuild it from scratch. They saw him pull parts from seemingly random vehicles and somehow make them fit perfectly. But what they saw at 1900 sharp changed everything. Ernie stepped out of the bay, wiped his hands on his coveralls, and looked directly at Chief Durant. "I'll need a blindfold," he said. Durant blinked. "What?" "Tomorrow morning, when they come to inspect, I'm going to show them how I learned to fix one of these. The hard way." The next morning brought visitors, the kind who didn't announce their arrival or waste time with pleasantries. 4 special operators in desert camo, shoulders squared, eyes that had seen too much and said too little. These weren't men who impressed easily, but there was something about their quiet intensity that made the motor pool feel smaller. Lieutenant Travis Niles, the team leader, spoke in the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command attention. "You sure the old man's up for this?" he asked Durant. Durant just shrugged. "You'll see." They watched as Ernie tied a dark cloth over his eyes and walked into Bay 3 with the confidence of a man navigating his own living room. The SUV sat with its hood up, waiting for judgment, and then something extraordinary happened. Working entirely by touch, Ernie began to disassemble and reassemble critical components of the vehicle's most complex systems. His hands moved with surgical precision, finding connections and troubleshooting problems that had stumped certified technicians working with full visibility and diagnostic equipment. The room fell silent except for the gentle sounds of mechanical surgery, the soft click of connectors being seated, the whisper of wires being routed, the precise tap of a wrench finding its mark. He realigned the fuel injection system. He rebuilt the ignition override. He bypassed safety protocols that most mechanics didn't even know existed. When he finally stepped back and untied the blindfold, the operators looked at Chief Durant with expressions that mixed respect and disbelief. "Try it," Ernie said quietly. Lieutenant Niles turned the key. The engine roared to life like a caged predator, finally set free. One of the SEALs stepped forward, his voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. "You ever work on these back in Fallujah?" Ernie interrupted, his weathered eyes meeting the operator's gaze. "Kandahar, Mogadishu, Ramadi. Take your pick." The silence that followed was profound. These were men who understood the weight of those names, who knew what it meant to keep machines running under enemy fire, who respected the kind of skill that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Chief Durant finally asked the question everyone had been wondering about for years. "What's your story, Ernie?" The old mechanic reached into his pocket and pulled out something that explained everything and nothing at once. A tarnished challenge coin bearing the Navy SEAL trident. "I served with a unit that didn't officially exist," he said quietly. "Fixed things under fire. Kept the wheels turning when everything else was falling apart. carried buddies out of burning vehicles, lost too many brothers to remember their names, but remembered just enough to never forget their faces. He looked at the SUV, then back at the assembled group. This isn't just a job for me. It never was. Every vehicle I fix, every mission I help make possible, it's for the ones who didn't make it home. It's my way of making sure their sacrifice still means something. Words spread through the base like wildfire, but not in the way you might expect. There were no official announcements, no newspaper articles, no ceremonies. Instead, something more powerful happened. Respect. Young mechanics who had once seen Ernie as just another old-timer suddenly started paying attention to his methods. Officers who had never set foot in the motor pool began dropping by with special requests. Sailors from other departments started bringing their personal vehicles to Bay 3, willing to wait weeks for Ernie's attention rather than go anywhere else. The change was subtle but unmistakable. The motor pool became more than just a place where broken things got fixed. It became a place where excellence was quietly practiced and humbly shared. Behind Ernie's tool chest, someone noticed a small memorial plaque that hadn't been there before. It read simply, "To those who stayed behind, and those who never came back." Below it, 3 sets of initials. Just 3, but somehow they spoke for dozens. Ernie's not there anymore. He left one morning without fanfare, without goodbyes, without explanation. Some say he was called back for one final classified assignment. Others believe he simply decided it was time to pass the torch to younger hands. But the lesson remained, carved into the culture of Bay 3 like initials in an old oak tree. Excellence doesn't announce itself, heroes don't always wear uniforms, and sometimes the most important work happens in the shadows. The new mechanics still talk about him in hushed tones, sharing stories that grow slightly larger with each telling. They've turned his old workbench into an unofficial shrine, keeping his tools organized exactly as he left them, hoping that somehow his skill might rub off through proximity. Chief Durant, now approaching retirement himself, still tells new arrivals about the ghost in Bay 3. "Some legends don't carry rank," he says. "They carry wrenches." Ernie's story isn't unique. It's universal. Right now, there are quiet heroes doing extraordinary work without recognition. The night shift nurses, the teachers spending their own money on supplies, the mechanics working miracles with determination, the veterans carrying invisible wounds but still serving their communities. Here's what you can do. Notice them, thank them, share their stories, be one yourself. The world needs more Ernies, people who show up, do the work, and make things better without expecting applause. People who understand that real heroism isn't about glory, but about showing up when it matters and leaving things better than you found them. Because some of the quietest people carry the loudest histories. Some of the best workers learn their trade under pressure. And some heroes don't wear medals. They wear work boots and carry the tools to fix whatever's broken. What's your Bay 3? What's the place where you can make a difference? One small repair at a time.